Today, I thought we'd look at one of the most mysterious yet unfortunate stories in military aviation. It's November 9th, 1958, in the Libyan desert. The wreckage of an abandoned World War II aircraft has just been found by a British oil exploration team. They radioed the Wheelus Air Base authorities, but as there were no records of any aircraft being lost in the region, no attempt was made to investigate the wreckage. Little did the British group know that they'd just discovered the answer to one of the biggest aviation puzzles of World War II. So, what is it that really happened with the Lady Be Good? The B-24D Liberator of the US Air Force, dubbed the Lady Be Good, was allocated to the 376th Bomber Group's 514th Bomb Squadron, which was based at Soluç Airfield in Libya. The Lady Be Good launched on its maiden combat mission, a bombing raid over Naples on April 4, 1943. Shortly after, it has totally vanished from sight in the process. Together with the formation of other B-24s, the aircraft had taken off from Soluç Airfield that afternoon. Unexpected changes in weather conditions forced half of the bombers to return back to base, but the Lady Be Good and another 3 aircraft continued their mission. The Lady Be Good had been among the last bombers to leave the airstrip, causing the formation to take flight in waves. She never managed to catch up to the others. The lady still hadn't reached her target and had to circle back that evening after even worse weather forced the other bombers to move to secondary targets. The first lieutenant, William J. Hatton, the bomber's pilot, was the last person to communicate with the aircraft, informing that the automatic direction finder was broken and also asking for help with navigation. For the uninformed, an automated direction finder, or ADF for short, can be used to focus on and find a specific location, such as an airfield or a navigation post, among many other things. The aircraft was never heard from again after that final communication. Despite the deployment of a search and rescue team, the aircraft and its crew were never located, leading to the assumption that they crashed over the Mediterranean Sea. Believe it or not, this was not an isolated incident, because for unknown reasons, a lot of airplanes during the war seemed to vanish into thin air with no clear answer. But the question of what actually caused these vanishes remained unanswered. The discovery of the Lady Be Good in the Kalanchio Sand Sea in Libya, roughly 450 miles south of Soluç Airfield, was quite the shock given the presumption that she was at the bottom of the Mediterranean waters. Following the original discovery of the debris in 1958, oil surveyors flying overhead saw it multiple times in 1959 as well. In May of that year, Wheelus Air Base dispatched a recovery team. Although the aircraft was found broken into 2 parts, they still managed to discover a shockingly well-preserved aircraft. She was kept in such good shape considering it remained at the crash site for 15 years. One of the engines still functioned, the radio could be used, one of her defensive machine guns could still fire. It was an amazing discovery, yet the recovery team was unable to locate any indications of the surviving crew members even though they discovered containers of drinking water within the aircraft. Very big ground searches were part of the first investigation, which was coordinated with air units. Hope and optimism was in the air, especially when equipment like parachutes, boots, and markers were among the many intriguing discoveries during all this. Yet, no remains were ever discovered. The search was eventually cancelled after several months of desperate inquiries, since it was assumed that the men's bodies had been taken by the shifting sands. 6 months later, a miracle occurs. There was yet another breakthrough. 5 crew members' bodies were discovered by British Petroleum employees. They were recognised as belonging to Lieutenants Hatton, Tonner, Hayes, Adams, and Lamotte. A vast stash of resources was found at the location, the most precious being Lieutenant Toner's diary. The puzzle was slowly starting to fit together as the investigation went on. The Lady Be Good had radioed for a directional reading on the evening of April 4th, 1943. Still, she ended up going too far beyond her target, even though the airbase was shooting signal flares. The radio direction finder on the base was equipped with a single loop antenna. This meant that the crew was unable to determine whether they were travelling towards or away from their goal, since the aircraft's direction finder was unable to distinguish between signals in front and behind. The crew had just assumed that they were still over the Mediterranean and therefore north of their base, when in fact they were heading south, plunging deep inland. After travelling over 400 miles inland, the Lady Be Good began to run out of fuel. The crew were doomed for a sad fate. Lacking experience, they thought they were still over the black waters of the Mediterranean, but it turns out they were above the vast dark sand dunes of Libya on this gloomy night. bad weather added on top. The pilots bailed from the plane. Sadly, it was later discovered that 2nd Lieutenant John Warofka's parachute had malfunctioned, causing him to perish instantly upon impact. With the aid of their flare guns, the remaining 8 crew members gradually came together to endure the descent. The now fully abandoned B-24 continued to fly for an additional 16 miles before making a mostly intact landing. Now, even though the bomber had life-saving supplies and equipment on board, no attempt was made to contact the downed aircraft, since the survivors believed their base was just 100 miles away. Little did they know, it was actually 4 times more far away, and there was only half a bottle of water between them. Through the desert, the men marched. According to Lieutenant Honnor's notebook, they marched through hell for 9 days without seeing anything except themselves. 5 of them eventually became too frail and weak to continue, but the others persisted in the hope of being saved. Sadly, their efforts proved hopeless. But the extent of these survivors' individual accomplishments cannot be ignored either way. It was calculated that the average person could only endure those roughless conditions for about 30 miles before dying. However, every survivor had journeyed more than 50 miles, and certain corpses were discovered up to 100 miles from the original landing locations. This could have been a very different story if the crew had chosen to return the wreckage of the aircraft in order to grab supplies and radio for assistance. All of the crew's remains, aside from Sergeant Vernon Moore's, were eventually located and returned to the United States. Despite the fact that Lady Be Good and her crew did not survive their adventure, their narrative has served as an inspiration for novels and has been mentioned in films and other media as an example of human bravery and perseverance in the most unfortunate circumstances. One of Lady Be Good's propellers can be located in Lake Linden, Michigan, and a memorial glass in the chapel at Wheelus Air Base is dedicated to their memory.